Welcome, everyone. We're diving into a fascinating world today, the hidden life of trees.
Mm.
Yeah, we're going to be exploring Peter Wohlleben book, The Hidden Life of Trees. We'll be drawing from the book itself and some cool academic research to kind of back things up, to uncover some of the mysteries and honestly just some surprising stuff about trees. Get ready to have your mind blown because we're going to be diving into how trees communicate, how they cooperate, even how they compete, all while looking like they're just standing still for hundreds of years.
One of the things that makes Wohlleben books so interesting is he's really good at explaining complicated science stuff in a way that anyone can understand. He's also got years and years of experience actually working with forests, which really comes through in his writing. It's almost like poetry sometimes.
Yeah, he starts off with some pretty big questions like, can trees talk?
Hmm.
Do they remember things? Can they actually learn and change over time? And based on the science, Wolben says, absolutely. He really makes you believe that trees are way more complex and connected than we usually think.
One of the most mind-blowing things in the book is how trees communicate. It's not through sounds or anything we can see. They actually have this huge underground network of roots and fungi. Wohlleben calls it the wood wide web, and it's like the internet for trees. It's super important for how forests survive and stay strong.
Okay, so what exactly is this wood wide web doing? Are we talking about trees sending each other text messages about the weather? Or like gossiping about the other trees?
Well, maybe not instant messages, but it's definitely a way for trees to talk to each other. They release these chemical signals into the soil, and then other trees pick them up through their roots. The fungi are like the middlemen in this whole thing, helping the signals travel further.
So what are they talking about? Is it just about threats like bugs or diseases?
It's way more than that. They share info about where to find water and nutrients, and they even help each other out when things get rough. Like, other trees can actually send food and support to their baby trees through this network so they can grow up strong.
Wow, that's incredible. It really is a whole support system, like a family. But I'm curious about something. If trees are so good at helping each other, how does competition work? Don't they have to fight for sunlight and water to survive?
It's like a balancing act. Cooperation is super important for the whole forest to stay healthy. But each tree still needs to compete for resources to stay alive.
Hmm.
They come up with some pretty amazing ways to get ahead, like growing super slowly or even waging a kind of chemical war against each other.
War, trees fighting each other, that sounds kind of intense.
Maybe sabotage is a better word.
Yeah.
Like beech trees are really good at using water efficiently. So in dry climates, they can outcompete trees that need more water, like spruce trees. It's this constant game of one-upmanship that can go on for hundreds or even thousands of years.
It makes you think about time in a different way. Like, we get impatient waiting for a website to load, but trees are on a whole other level. Volbin really emphasizes this difference in how we see time.
Totally. Talks about how trees can spend decades, even centuries, just kind of chilling, waiting for the right conditions to really take off. He describes these young beech trees. They're like teenagers hanging out in the forest basement, sometimes for like 200 years, getting fed and taken care of by their mother trees until it's finally their turn to grow tall.
200 years, that's like waiting for a delayed flight forever. It makes you realize how patient and tough trees really are.
And it's not just about surviving. Trees are also busy shaping their world, creating the conditions they need to grow. They change the temperature, the humidity, even how water moves around, creating this stable microclimate within the forest. It's like they're the ultimate architects, designing their own living space.
Wollheim gives some really cool examples of that, like how deciduous trees shade the streams, which helps control the water temperature. That way the fish and other creatures in the water can stay healthy. Or how fallen trees, instead of going to waste, actually create these mini ecosystems, providing food and shelter for all kinds of organisms. It's this beautiful cycle of life and death and rebirth.
And it makes you rethink what death even means. Wohlleben says we shouldn't think of a dead tree as a loss. It's actually super valuable to the forest, the way it decomposes with all the fungi and insects and microorganisms breaking it down. It's not a sad thing at all. It's actually a crucial part of how the forest stays alive.
The way he describes it, it's like the tree throws one last epic party, inviting all these creatures to come and feast and make their home in its remains.
Exactly. And all those creatures have a really important job. They break down the tree's body and return all the nutrients to the soil, which then helps new life grow. He uses the stag beetle as an example. This beetle spends up to 8 years as a larva, munching on the rotting roots of dead trees.
8 years, that's longer than some PhD programs. It's amazing to think about all the life that depends on these seemingly dead trees.
And this whole intricate system is facing some serious threats. Wohlleben doesn't sugarcoat the impact we humans are having on forests,
Yeah.
from cutting down too many trees to climate change. He wants us to change how we see forests, to stop thinking of them just as resources we can use.
He compares those tree farms where everything is planted in straight rows
Mhm.
to these ancient, untouched forests that are bursting with life. It's like comparing a boring hospital room to a wild, colorful jungle.
Perfect analogy. These ancient forests have trees of all ages and sizes. They have learned to live together in this complex web of relationships, which makes them much stronger and more resilient when things change. It's like a blueprint for how we can manage forests in a way that respects nature.
And a way that recognizes all the important lessons we can learn from trees, like their patience, how they adapt to change, how they cooperate and support each other. Those are all things we could use a little more of in our own lives.
Absolutely. Olben even suggests that the reason we feel so calm and relaxed when we walk in the woods
Yeah.
might be because we're tapping into this peaceful communication between the trees, like a reminder that we're all connected.
That's a beautiful thought. And it brings us to what Holben is really trying to say. If we can understand the secret life of trees, it can change our whole relationship with the natural world. Instead of seeing nature as something separate from us, we can start to see ourselves as part of this amazing interconnected web of life.
Which leads to a really interesting question. If trees can communicate and work together in such complex ways, what other secrets are they hiding? What else could we learn if we just take the time to listen? So about that communication, Olben shares some research suggesting that trees might even be using sound waves to talk to each other. It's pretty new research. But imagine if we could actually understand the language of trees.
That would be incredible, like having a secret decoder ring for the forest. But even without knowing exactly what they're saying, it's obvious that trees are masters of cooperation. Holden talks about how they work together to make this really stable environment, almost like a society with its own safety net.
What's really cool is that this cooperation often goes beyond just one type of tree. Even when trees are competing for resources, they seem to understand that if the whole forest collapses, they're all doomed.
So they're thinking long term, realizing that individual success doesn't mean much if the whole ecosystem fails.
Exactly. And this cooperation isn't just between trees. Wohlleben describes all these amazing relationships between trees and fungi, bacteria, even insects. It's like this whole network of support that benefits everyone.
He calls them helpers, which is a perfect name, from the bacteria in the soil that helps them get nitrogen, to the woodpeckers that eat the bugs that try to attack them. It's like trees have a whole team working for them.
And those relationships are super complex and beneficial for everyone involved. For instance, some types of fungi actually act like extensions of the tree's root system. They help the tree absorb water and nutrients from a much bigger area. And in return, the tree gives the fungi sugar from photosynthesis.
That's a pretty sweet deal. Everyone brings something to the table. Trees are the photosynthesis pros, fungi are the nutrient hunters, and they all win.
Precisely. But this delicate balance can be messed up. Wohlleben spends a lot of time talking about the damage that clear-cutting does. He compares it to wiping out an entire community.
Yeah, it really hits home that we're not just talking about some abstract idea here. We're talking about real-life consequences for individual trees and the whole forest.
The damage can be devastating. When you clear-cut a forest,
Yeah.
you lose the trees, but you also destroy that incredibly complex web of relationships. It took centuries to develop, and it can take generations for it to come back.
So what's the alternative?
Wohlleben is a big advocate for sustainable forestry practices, like selectively cutting down trees, which gives the forest a chance to regrow more naturally. It might take longer, but it's way less disruptive.
Makes sense.
He uses ancient forests that haven't been touched by humans as examples. These forests are incredibly diverse and resilient, with trees of all ages and sizes living together.
It's like the difference between a city with a rich history and a brand new suburb where everything looks the same. One feels alive and the other feels kind of sterile.
Exactly. And it shows how important it is to protect these ancient forests, not just because they're beautiful, but because they can teach us so much about how to live in harmony with nature.
Speaking of beauty, Wohlleben also talks about how trees have their own sense of aesthetics. It's not just about survival. There's this element of beauty and expression, kind of like in the human world.
Oh, yeah. He describes how beech trees get these wrinkles in their bark as they get older, almost like a sign of wisdom and experience.
And they even seem to encourage moss to grow in those wrinkles, adding these little touches of green to their silver bark.
Like they're accessorizing. But this sense of aesthetics goes beyond just wrinkles. Wohlleben talks about how trees grow differently, depending on their surroundings. Sometimes they bend and twist to get around obstacles or reach the sunlight.
It's like they're aware of their environment and adjusting their growth accordingly. Some trees even seem to like their personal space, keeping a distance from their neighbors.
He describes some trees as being shy, avoiding crowds. And this awareness extends to the whole forest. Trees seem to understand that they're part of something bigger, and that their actions affect everyone.
So it's not just about each tree surviving on its own. It's about finding that balance between individual needs and the needs of the whole community.
Exactly. And this brings us back to one of the big ideas in the book. We can learn a lot from trees.
Their patience, their toughness, the way they can compete without destroying each other, those are all valuable lessons.
Wohlleben wants us to see the forest as more than just a bunch of trees. It's this complex, interconnected society with its own rules and history and wisdom.
He encourages us to slow down, pay attention, really listen to the sounds of the forest.
Open our senses to the subtle language of nature and discover the hidden life all around us.
And realize that we're part of that web of life too, connected to everything in ways we might never fully understand.
And that by respecting and protecting nature, we're ultimately protecting ourselves.
That's a powerful message. We've covered a lot of ground already. But there's another fascinating side to tree life we need to explore.
Right, the whole mystery of tree sickness. How do these giants deal with illness and injury?
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about trees getting sick. They can't exactly call a doctor. So how do they cope?
That's what makes it so fascinating. Trees have developed all these incredible strategies for dealing with diseases, pests, even physical damage. It's like they have this whole arsenal of defenses, from chemical warfare to physical adaptations.
I remember that part where Wohlleben described how a tree reacts to a fungal infection. It's like they go into lockdown, sealing off the infected area and flooding it with defensive compounds.
Yeah, it's a super sophisticated immune system.
Yeah.
Trees are incredibly resilient.
But they don't always win those battles. Wohlleben talks about the devastating impact of some tree diseases, like Dutch elm disease, which has killed off millions of trees.
It's a stark reminder that even the strongest trees can be vulnerable, and our actions as humans can make those diseases spread even faster.
It's true. Introducing invasive species, messing with ecosystems, even climate change. All of that can make trees more likely to get sick.
Exactly. That's why Wohlleben keeps emphasizing how important it is to protect biodiversity and natural habitats. A forest that's healthy and diverse is much better at resisting disease and other threats.
It makes sense. He also talks about how insects can be both good and bad for trees. On one hand, you've got pests like bark beetles that can destroy entire forests.
Right. But then you've got beneficial insects like ladybugs that eat those pests, keeping their populations under control.
It's all connected, this intricate web of interactions. It shows just how delicate the balance is in a forest ecosystem.
It all comes back to the idea that we need to think about forest management holistically.
Yeah.
We need to understand how everything is connected.
We can't just focus on getting rid of pests or producing as much timber as possible. We have to consider the bigger picture.
Exactly. We have to work with nature, not against it, if we want healthy forests for future generations.
Okay, so we've talked about the social lives of trees, their incredible communication networks, their defense mechanisms, even their sense of style.
And we can't forget about the impact they have on our planet and on us.
Right, the big picture stuff. Trees are so much more than just pretty scenery. They're essential for life on Earth. They give us oxygen, clean our air and water, and regulate our climate.
Exactly. They're like the Earth's lungs, taking in massive amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it in their wooden roots.
And they're crucial for the water cycle, too. They help regulate rainfall and prevent soil erosion.
But their benefits go beyond just keeping the planet healthy. Wohlleben describes how forests actually have this calming effect on us. They reduce stress and boost our well-being.
He talks about forest bathing, immersing yourself in the sights, sounds, and smells of the forest.
And research has shown that spending time in nature can lower blood pressure, reduce anxiety, and just make you feel happier.
It's like trees have a superpower. They sustain life on Earth and nourish our souls at the same time.
This connection between trees and humans has been around for centuries.
Yeah, from the ancient druids who worship trees to modern-day nature lovers who find peace and quiet in the woods. There's always been this deep understanding of the power of trees to heal and inspire.
Which brings us back to the critical importance of protecting these incredible beings.
It's not just about saving trees for their own sake, it's about saving ourselves.
Our survival, our well-being, our future. It all depends on healthy, resilient forests.
Wohleben's book is a real call to action. It reminds us that we're not separate from nature, we're a part of it.
And by understanding and respecting the secret lives of trees, we can start to heal our relationship with the natural world.
One thing that really blew my mind was those stories about trees surviving in crazy conditions, like windswept mountains and scorching deserts, places where most life would struggle to hang on.
Right, he talks about those tiny dwarf trees on the tundra, getting blasted by wind and snow, but still clinging to life, growing super slowly over hundreds of years.
It's like they've mastered the art of slow living, taking their time, conserving their energy, and adapting to whatever life throws at them.
And this adaptability isn't just physical. Trees are also incredibly flexible in their behavior.
Oh, yeah. Wohlleben explains how trees can change their growth patterns, how much water they use, even their chemical defenses, all in response to changes in their environment.
Gives that example of trees that have gone through a drought. They actually get better at conserving water in the future, like they learn from their experiences.
It's almost like they have a memory of past hardships. Makes you wonder what else they might remember. What other secrets are locked away in those ancient rings?
That's a great question. It shows just how much we still have to learn about what trees are capable of.
And you know what else is fascinating? Wohlleben challenges our whole idea of what a tree even is. He describes how some trees can actually exist as multiple connected individuals. They share resources and communicate through their root systems.
He calls them clonal colonies. It kind of blurs the lines between individual and community.
Yeah, it's like one giant organism spread out over a huge area, a super tree with multiple trunks and a shared network of roots, maybe even a shared consciousness.
Whoa. It's a good reminder that nature doesn't always fit neatly into our human categories.
And that there's still so much to discover about the diversity and complexity of life on Earth.
Which brings us back to one of the most powerful ideas in the book. Recognizing the intelligence, resilience, and interconnectedness of trees can actually change how we see the world.
It's a shift from thinking of nature as something separate from us, something we can exploit or control.
To realizing that we're all part of this larger web of life, a community of beings, all connected and dependent on each other.
And that by respecting and protecting this web, we're ultimately protecting ourselves.
Exactly. Wohleben's book reminds us that we have a lot to learn from the wisdom of trees.
Their patience, their adaptability, their ability to cooperate and thrive in community.
These are qualities we could all use a little more of.
Especially if we want a sustainable future for ourselves and for generations to come.
This deep dive into the hidden life of trees has been incredible.
Yeah, it's been like a journey into a world that's both familiar and totally alien.
It's definitely left me with a sense of awe and wonder at the beauty and complexity of the natural world.
Me too. And a renewed commitment to protect these precious forests.
For our sake, and for the sake of all the amazing creatures who call them home.
So next time you find yourself walking through a forest, take a moment to slow down.
Breathe in the fresh air.
Listen to the rustling leaves.
And appreciate the hidden life all around you.
The trees are speaking.
If we just take the time to listen.
Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep learning.
And keep diving deep into the fascinating world around us.
Did you get any of that?